Welcome back to this week's episode of Thoroughbreds Declassified. We have a very exciting episode in store for you. I am joined today by my co-host and father, Ryan Campbell, as well as my husband, Justin Morris. Now, we are going to hit some topics that are very relevant in the industry right now. That's right. This is our exclusive In the Breeding Shed episode. So, Dad, why don't we give a little bit of background about our experience as thoroughbred breeders?
With the very relevant thing is the number of articles coming out and people talking about how low the foal crops are being. And when we first got into the breeding business, there were 30 some thousand foals born, around 41,000 mares covered. And today we're looking at maybe 20,000 mares covered in North America and 16 to 17,000 babies being born each year. So there's been a continual drastic drop, and that makes for smaller fields, smaller people involved. So there's been an industry-wide discussion, everybody, putting their opinions in on why and how we reverse this. And I think it's very relevant that from our standpoint, as breeders, as stallion owners, and we're not necessarily the size of the multi-million-dollar farms and billion-dollar farms that maybe from a standpoint of the mid-sized to small-sized breeder, we can shed some light that's really not even being looked at this point in time.
Yeah, and I think we have a unique perspective. I mean, we got our first broodmare in 2008. She was in full with her first baby. We get her in the winter of 2007.
Yeah.
Was that what that was? Okay. Yeah, we had our first foal that we ever bred in 2008. And, I feel like we've been in the game for a while. And because we haven't had the resources that a lot of other major operations have, we may not have the most prolific resume, but I feel like we've seen these issues present at every single stage and every single demographic of the industry. And I think that's where, our perspective is a little bit more unique than you're going to find.
Yeah, we have done a lot of breed recommendations for other operations.
Yeah.
So while we were focusing solely on the stallion market with our business, we were still dealing with other customers that were asking us, hey, I want to buy this mare. I want to buy a mare. Can you help us find one? Can you go to the sales for us? Can you recommend who to breed this mare to, or those kind of things. So on top of our own personal mares, we were actually involved in you know way more breed recommendations and mares being bought than we actually own personally. So that
And I
gives
think
us
we also,
20 years of being in this business and seeing it go from the 41,000 mares to today.
yeah, and I think we also have another unique perspective on the podcast. So Justin hasn't really been around thoroughbred breeding at all up until about 2023, but he lives here in Lexington. He's from Lexington. So prior to getting in the thoroughbred industry by proxy of me, what did you what was your general idea of horse breeding and horse sales and racing industry here as a Lexingtonian?
Obviously, I knew it was big down here. The one thing I think, and I'm sure we'll get into it, is outreach is very important for the program. To be honest with you, even though I'm wrapped up right in horse country, I didn't really hear a whole lot about it. You're directly involved. You may see a commercial on FanDuel or somewhere out there to see it, but I really didn't know a whole lot about it. The one perception that I have is kind of what we dive in today, is that it's a rich man sport, and that's the only people that are kind of allowed in are successful, at least from the outside perspective looking in. And as you continue to look at it, that trend kind of holds true for the most part because they're strangling out, as we'll talk a little bit later on, the middle and small class breeders. So just trying to kind of find the balance of how a regular Joe can get in is a very interesting concept. And I wonder if we're past that point or if that point is reconcilable, exactly what the next steps are.
Interesting.
And that's the big question is, and if foal crops keep shrinking, are we going to be able to support the industry? Is it going to be a situation where there's just not enough horses being produced to even continue in the industry?
Right.
Or is it going to be that the only people in the industry are, a handful, and when I say a handful, 50 or 60 of the great big breeders out there? So,
Cool.
So let's get into
I thought that was a good opening.
Yep.
Everything good on my end?
Mm-hmm.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Cool.
I know you need to reintroduce us, so let me shut up.
And without further ado, let's dive in on today's topic in the breeding shed.
So we all know there's problems, especially the big indicator is foal crop size.
Mm-hmm.
Got a massive decline in the number of mares bred. And when you're not breeding that many mares, then obviously there's the smaller foal crops, which leads to smaller field sizes when it comes to the races.
Mm-hmm.
Like last year, pretty much all of the Triple Crown prep races in California were ran with 6 or less horses in the races.
Well, Bob Hope recently wasn't able to fill, so they had to cancel this year's edition of it.
And canceling a graded stakes race.
It's insane.
That's unheard of.
It's only the second time in the race's history that it failed to fill.
I think one of the big problems that we have is the trend of breeding so many of our mares and to first year stallions.
Mm-hmm.
You think, okay, this horse was a great racehorse, but if you look at the number of stallions that are standing, the vast majority of them are not successful. But yet we're loading up our first year stallions with 100 to 200 and some odd mares,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't even know if they're going to make it. And that leads into the third point that we have up here is the commercial breeding, which is some of the things with the first year stallions that we're talking about. It's bottlenecking the thoroughbred's genetic diversity because so many babies are being produced by such a small handful of the horses out there.
I mean, it's like if you look at Kentucky right now, every single farm has a tappet. Every single farm, at least one into mischief line horse, whether it is by into mischief himself or by a son of into mischief. Every single farm has one. You're starting to see it even with Not This Time. I have a feeling we're going to see so many Not This Times go to stud. I mean, it's getting to a point where I've talked to you about it. Whenever I see Stallion come to the roster and it's an into mischief or a tappet or whatever, you just automatically are kind of like, if I've seen one, I've seen them all. Yep. Just because they're so prevalent today.
One of the things we're seeing is the heavy increase in stallion fees, and that increase in fee. I mean, a lot of it is in your first year stallions or your very successful stallions that are proven. We've got another issue of if you do not breed in Lexington or foal out in Lexington, there's a negative stigma to the quality of the horse, or even racing in a regional market.
Now, I do think this is nuanced because there are certain regional programs where it's definitely not a problem. But I think outside of your Florida and New York and California kind of gets stigmatized too. So really outside of Florida and New York, that's where you're really getting, kind of scrutinized.
Right. And then how quickly the Kentucky farms are moving stallions out of the Kentucky market.
Yeah.
It's if they don't have the grade 1 winner by a certain amount of time, the stud piece starts to tumble. Do we need to keep those stallions around longer? I mean, we saw one this year that we just cannot believe has moved, and this is his first crop of 2-year-olds.
Yeah.
Now, granted, he was a special case, but I do think in general we're seeing farms give up on stallions a lot earlier than they had previously.
And now we've got one of our other things is our first year stallions that are out there standing. They're standing for equal or a higher price than what some of your more successful proven stallions are in the Lexington market, which is absolutely crazy to think that a stallion that's never created a baby before, never had a baby race, is more expensive to breed to than a successful multi-year stallion at this point. Once again, with the regional markets, you're seeing that prices don't reflect what they would reflect if that baby was born in Kentucky, even if it's by the same sire. If you have one stallion bred to one mare, if that baby is foaled in Kentucky and it's a Kentucky bred, you see that it's going to bring more money than if it was born, let's say, in Iowa. The regional market is not it's not getting the respect that I think it deserves. And then to increase the industry to what it once was, we're also going to have more funding for aftercare. So we need to be more responsible for the lives that we create once they've come off the track, or even down to the broodmares once they're done producing. We need to have more funding for aftercare to take care of those
Agreed.
those horses from our industry. So, Nick, this is pretty much your entire involvement. These numbers from the declining foal crop.
Mm-hmm.
If you look between 2000 and 2007, it's really it's the same. I mean, maybe 200 more, 200 less, or whatever. We start seeing that decline around 2008. It slowly declines from there. We go from 34,000 to 32, 2009. But the heavy decline is 2009 until today. We went.
And let's just note, it's interesting what the difference between 2009 and 2010 was. There was a 12% difference between the amount of horses produced in 2009 and 2010.
Stock market crash. Yeah. That was 2009. There was, that's the year that some of the auto industry was going bankrupt, and it was a really big economic downturn. But if you
And
really look at it,
doesn't have the same situation, but that makes sense because they're breeding off of the economy from the year prior.
right,
Yeah.
but that decline is just, it's year after year after year. The 2024 full crop being at 16,675.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have the stats for 2025 because they're not out yet.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're only producing 16,600 foals, there's a lot of real good rule. Let's say 40% of those do not ever make it into training, whether
Right.
it's from illness, death, injury. You know that puts us down to 12,000 horses to just get in training.
Mm-hmm.
And there are, I think the last stat that I saw, there's 35,000 races in the U.S. every year. This include and these numbers, 35,000 races. It's going to be hard to have the full crops or the race fields filled. So I do think full crop size it's the most visual part of the problem. But I think, and give me your guys' opinion. I think that the full crop size is not the problem.
Mm-mm.
It's the resultant of what really the problem is.
But I also want to bring up there's a pretty important thing that happened in 2012. Really, 2013 was the first year. That's when the Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance was formed, and there really has been a push for aftercare. So I think one thing that you're also seeing with the full crops is people are recognizing that not everything has to be bred. So I think that's another contributor that we're seeing that isn't necessarily as talked about as much. I don't think that part is a bad thing, but it is something to keep in mind.
And then to add to,
that's 20,000 horses.
I'm not saying it's the only issue. I'm saying that that is something else that people have to keep in mind when they look at these numbers is that we're living in an era where the industry is now championed that there's more than one outside trajectory for a horse. So it's just something to keep in mind. And that may contribute to why there's been such a tiny part of why there's such a tiny decline through over the years. That fact that it's consistent and it's always above about 2%.
well, and from somebody new too, you're kind of getting attacked at both ends because a lot of what I've heard you all say over the past couple of years are how horses are going to stud much earlier than what they used to or retiring much earlier. So not only do you have lower foal crop sizes, you have more horses retiring early to chase that first year stallion check. So then it's almost a double-sided problem because we've got some leaving early and we don't have anywhere near the numbers to replace them on the back
pipeline, yeah.
So, but I really do think correcting some of the other issues or all of the other issues that we're going to continue to talk about ultimately is what we'll see the increase in full crop size. Part of it is the sales. If you're breeding and the price that you're getting for babies is not anywhere close to the cost that it takes to raise them and get them to the sales, you can only do that for so many years before you're no longer in the business.
Mm-hmm.
So, when we talked about, our sales special that we did, I talked about supply and demand. Prices are going up because the supply is low, but also if the prices continue to increase, you're going to see more people coming back into breed mares and sell babies because they can finally not lose their shirt because they're trying to do it. And it's not all about making money. I mean, a lot of it, you have to make money to stay alive. Most people in the horse business, it's a passion. So it doesn't always have to make money, but you can only take losses for so many years. So,
right.
But I think, just going back to it, if we address what are actually the problems in the breeding industry, then I think you'll see these numbers on the increase instead on the decline.
Yep.
So this is something I put together. I ended up showing Nick this, but it's, what do these horses have in common? We've got Mystic Dan, California Chrome, Big Brown, and I'll have another. I think the majority of people are going to say that these horses won the Kentucky Derby. And, it is true. They all won the Kentucky Derby. And all of them did it in very exciting fashion. From Big Brown, his dominant victory, California Chrome, the hype behind him. I'll have another. It was an amazing stretch drive. So what they're known for is they won the Kentucky Derby.
You didn't throw a Rich Strike on there?
No. So we also have these three horses. What do they have in common? Monomoy Girl, Torpedo Anna, and Blind Luck. I know Justin knows who Torpedo Anna is.
Yep, that's
probably everybody listening knows.
Hey, I recognize the silks on one of those horses.
Oh, I did not even notice that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my thought was that she's a broodmare at Spendthrift.
Yep.
She was someone else.
What do these horses have in common in this picture that everybody's going to guess?
I don't know if Monomoy won the Kentucky Oaks.
Yes, she did.
She did? Yeah.
Yep.
Well, they're all Oaks winners. And these are all your Breeders' Cup Classic winners.
Yeah, we've got White Abario, Bayern, Nick's Go, and the only two-time winner of the Breeders' Cup Classic.
Tis now wins it for America.
Yep. But there's one thing that all of them have in common. Not just the Oaks, not just the Derby, not just the Breeders' Cup, but every one of those horses was sired by a non-fashionable, non-commercial stallion. We've got White Abario, who was sired by Race Day, who was no longer in the United States. He was moved on overseas. We have Bayern, who was by the sire Awfully Wild. Nick knows I liked Awfully Wild.
We love Awfully Wild. But and it was to the point where I forgot that he really wasn't as respected in the regional market because we loved him so much.
Yeah. Nick's Go was by Painter. And Tis Now by C's Tizzy, which C's Tizzy stood his entire career in California. He never was anything more than just fashionable in California.
Yeah.
We've got Mystic Dan, who was sired by Golden Sense, California Chrome by another Kentucky Stallion that, in Lucky Pulpit, that although Lucky Pulpit got you, useful horses during the entire Triple Crown series, the media just beat up on him that he was by a nobody.
And wasn't he in California at the time? I believe at that point he'd already gotten moved on.
Lucky Pulpit's always been in California. He never moved.
Yeah.
Boundary stood at Claiborne and was just, he wasn't popular really at all. And then I'll have another was by a sire that stood at Three Chimneys in Flower Alley.
Who is Cyberknife's broodmare sire now.
Right. I know everybody has all the love for Torpedo Anna, and they should, but Fast Anna was not your overly expensive. I believe Fast Anna was in that $5,000 to $10,000 range. Was not commercial. Monomoy Girls by a sire named Tapizar. Tapizar has actually even been moved to not to California, to Canada.
Yep.
He didn't get kept. Pollard's Vision, the sire of Blind Luck, he was just a useful stallion in making racehorses. He wasn't your big commercial type stallion. So, like Golden Sense and Mystic Dan, absolutely amazing that you can breed to a $10,000 stallion, and they got a Kentucky Derby winner.
But it's not shocking, really. When you look at it, I mean, look at these sires. Most of them were hard-knocking racehorses themselves, or they had talent and ability on the track. The issue is either they weren't by the right sire, or they just weren't throwing as many graded stakes winners as other horses in their crop.
Or the one other thing, their sales numbers weren't high enough in the sales, which I think that has a lot to do with it. But we'll talk about that.
Yep.
So you hear us talk about non-fashionable, non-commercial sires, commercial sires, regional programs, regional sires. So let's do an explanation of what types of sires there are out there. First sire is commercial sire, which can also be called a breed to sell stallion. Most often they're going to stand in Kentucky. I say most often because there can be the occasion that a horse outside of Kentucky will be pretty fashionable in the commercial sales ring. You got to go back to Northern Dancer, who never stood in Kentucky, but was definitely a commercial sire. It's often a stallion standing their first, second, or third year at stud, which means they have absolutely no progeny, sons or daughters, that have even reached the track yet. Now, see if you agree with me on this, Nick. Of the first year, first, second, third year stallions, the ones more likely to perform well in the sales ring are probably going to be the ones that are standing for 12,500 or higher. There will be, I said most likely, there will be occasions where the $7,500 stallion fee, those horses sell very well commercially, but you're more likely to get that at 12.5 or higher. You agree?
Yeah.
another proven stallions, which means they have, racehorses out there, 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, and above. Typically, I'm going to say maybe 25,000 and above, or more. More commercial, and of the proven sires, the higher the stud fee, the higher the sales price usually with them. If you breed to Curlin, you're going to spend a lot more money on a stud fee, but you might.
Let's also bring up that doesn't automatically mean a successful sale or anything like that. So when you're looking at these commercial stallions, let's say you have like a Curlin who is just, I think he's 225, something like that now. So it's going to look a lot flashier that you're able to sell a $450,000 horse, but you're really only doubling your stud fee. So that's something to keep in mind. It gets tough to say that the less likely something will perform well, because I think the concept of performing well itself is so nuanced, because you could have a Motown who stands for $5,000. Well, if you sell that baby for $20,000, you're getting 4 times the stud fee. But it may not look as flashy on paper. So I think that's kind of, you just have to keep that perspective, is that idea of performing well is completely dependent on what bracket the stud is actually in price wise.
Yeah, I mean, I'll use, for example, a first year stallion who has a $30,000 stud fee. If you sell that baby for $90,000, that's 3 times the stud fee. You're losing the 30, so you make 60 minus your expenses of creating and raising the baby. But if you breed to a $75,000 stallion and you sell the baby for 90, you're only able to cover your expenses after the stud fee's paid with $20,000. So,
and I think that's where, if we're talking commercial stallions, so much of the commercial concept, in my opinion, is just marketing.
Yeah.
Whatever can look the flashiest, and we'll get to talk about why that's such an issue. But something to keep in mind is a lot of the commercial industry right now is just based around what sire line can get the best marketing.
And the higher the stud fee, the more money you can lose.
Yep.
And in the United States, it's typically a stallion who ran on dirt.
Yeah.
Turf sires are not nearly as respected in the United States as they would be in Europe or pretty much anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
High-end proven stallions from other countries.
I disagree on this. I don't think that those are as loved as
Frankel.
As we think.
No name
that's
ever.
One, but that's, I don't think that they're as commercial because they're from the UK or Europe.
Because of the expense to get them here, it's going to be those level of stallions that have their babies come here to be sold, is my thought.
Sure.
And generational talents. Once again, Frankel. Somebody like that never raced in the United States, but if a Frankel baby came to the United States, I think it would be a bidding war to see who could get it.
And I would be very clear that those normally don't come to the U.S. We normally don't get, and sometimes you'll get some off the wall like Canadian stallions, but you typically don't get anything from overseas.
And Canada is considered North America, so that kind of doesn't. Yeah. Non-commercial stallions, which we also call breed to race stallions, because most of the people that are breeding to the non-commercial stallion, they're probably going to keep the baby and race it themselves. Most often standing in Kentucky. And it's kind of a stopping point. I'd say it's stallions who have runners who stand for 15,000 or below. And the reason I bumped it up to 15 is because there's 2 of them that are really skirting that price that are considered from Darley that are considered, race sires that just consistently throw great racehorses. But
I can think of one that's outside of that price range that I still would consider a breeder race.
Who?
Oscar Performance.
Well, yeah, because of turf.
Yeah, and he has thrown hit after hit. Now, granted, he is the excessive, and I think we want to be clear with this too. There are going to be situations where they breed to a stallion that has a bigger stud feed that also doubles as a sales horse. They could be, you usually have a bit more money to your disposal when you do this, but they will breed to a horse like Oscar Performance, who is $60,000 to breed to. But you know you're going to get a racehorse because his numbers are just absolutely insane, and you have that patented ability that if you need to, you can sell him too.
And then typically a stallion in Kentucky that's standing for, and I said typically, not always, but typically a stallion that's standing in Kentucky for $5,000 or less is most likely going to be moving from Kentucky in the near future. There are some formally commercial sires that have lost their commercial appeal that have been in Kentucky forever. Sky Mesa was one of them.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of his career, he stood for 5,000, but at the early part of his career, a lot of people bred to him.
These days, I think that number is actually closer to 10,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's a lot of $7,500 horses getting moved on. Yeah.
Our next one, type of stallion, and last would be a regional stallion, state-bred stallion. Often these state-bred stallions formerly stood in Kentucky. They may be new stallions that just didn't fit the Kentucky market, but that doesn't mean that just because they couldn't demand the 15, 20, 30, $40,000 stud fee of a first-year sire in Kentucky, that they're not just as useful.
And I know, of course, we're not talking about the Hoosier highlight right now, but I think a beautiful example of this is actually Bango, who just moved into where's he going? Breakaway. He is the winningest horse in Churchill Downs history, but not from a fashionable sire line, at least to go survive standing in Kentucky. Doesn't have like the huge graded 6 victories that you need, but like in a program in Indiana where you're looking for that iron horse, you're looking for a horse that can go the distance and take a little bit of a heavier schedule, I'll say. A horse like that would fit in beautifully in a regional program.
The regional stallion, state-bred stallion, most likely their foals will be able to run in restricted races, depending on the regional program that you go to. But the vast majority of them, they would be able to. And what we mean by restricted state races would be there is a category of races that are written that are, let's say, Indiana sired. Only foals of stallions that stand in Indiana can run in those races.
And
there's restricted stakes races at the same time. The other thing about a state-bred regional sire is that their foals will be eligible for state breeders awards, depending on where, what program they stand in. Some states have a lot better breeders awards, and some don't. So That is a benefit of the regional stallion, the state bred stallion. So that covers the basically the three types of stallions. I mean, I don't think a whole lot of people outside being heavy in the industry have really thought about categorizing them, but that's what the categorization is for the stallions that stand.
Yeah.
You wanna take this one, Nick?
Yeah. So, are we breeding racehorses or a sales product? Which I agree it is kind of a strange question for a racing industry, especially when we're involving live animals with this. I know that's just another layer we're going to add on there, but for me, that's something that's important to keep in mind. And I do think, why can't we do both? I think that's a valid question. When we're breeding these horses, we have to keep in mind that our goals with them, they may be immediate for us, but these are horses that have to live with the decision making that we've made, whether it's selling a sales product or breeding a racehorse. So I think it's important to have both in mind when you're making your mating. Even if you're not planning to race these horses, someone is. It's something to keep in mind. But we have Wise Dan to the left hand side, who is by Wiseman's Ferry, who at the time, I don't think he was at the time Dan was created, but when Dan was running, he was a Pennsylvania stallion, versus a horse like the Curlin Beholder colt on the right hand side, who
I
sold
was
for.
wrong about that, by the way, when we talked earlier. He's
Mhm.
already broke his maiden.
Okay. This is a horse that, someone dropped $5 million on, you know, um, I think it's just an important concept to keep in mind.
I think the importance of any breeder is yes, you want to, especially if you're going to sell, you want to sell and be able to do very well.
Mm-hmm.
But you should also, I think there's a middle ground. I think you have your commercial stallions, but instead of looking at them as oh, this commercial stallion's got the best numbers, this commercial stallion's got the best numbers, you got to look at how can I create the best racehorse that is going to get me the best price.
Yeah.
Not just stallion XYZ is the hottest selling stallion, first, second, third year stallion out there. That's who I'm going to breed to.
Not only are you thinking of how can you get the most price, we're regional breeders. So another thing that we have to keep in mind is these horses, there's a good chance that we could earn some additional money with them. So you don't want to just breed a mare to a stallion because he has insane sales numbers if he's got an insanely bad winners from starters percentage, because you want the odds to be in your favor that you're going to have a horse go win and get you some mailbox money.
Well, and even if you're bowling in Kentucky,
mm-hmm. You want those KBIF versus
way more than that. You want your mare to produce a successful racehorse, because after that horse is a successful racehorse, every foal she has after that is more valuable.
So what do you think on this?
I think it depends on where you're at. I think it is doable, but I only think it's doable if you have the financial resources behind it.
Yeah.
I think for this level where we're at, you almost have to make a choice with each one, because it's one of those is while you have to be able to justify and I know you all have your certain rules on which ones that you take to the track, but a lot of times you do have to make that sales discussion, because what people don't talk about is sometimes you do get lucky and you get payout of proceeds or some sort of foal share. But if you don't, you are spending all that money in the meantime on those horses till it gets to sale. And especially if you're racing it, you're dedicating even more money, because you're not getting that sale at possibly a weanling. You're not getting a sale at two. very best case scenario, they race at 2, and a lot of times the success doesn't come at 2. So you're investing 3 full years into this, paying for everything. It's like at that point, it may make you question: does it need to be a sales product? Because I've dumped all this in, and it's why you get the excitement of getting to that first race. They break the first maiden, great. But let's say that they don't, and we go on to another year and then that. So it is trying to find a balance, and I do think it's a money game. So it's one of those, at least at the moment, I think the only way that you can truly balance it is figuring out a middle ground, but I don't know what that middle ground is, at least.
I have an idea.
Okay.
I think your middle ground is you play in the mid-range. You find a horse that has some commercial potential or has residual commercial. You know, he's a horse that is respected to where we've talked about him a lot. By most people's standards, Motown probably wouldn't be one to go to. He's a $5,000 stud. You have the flexibility. If you need to run, if you put a nice broodmare underneath him and he throws a nice physical, you can run that thing through a sale. And let's say you get 20 grand for it. Hey, that's 4 times your stud fee and that's covering some of your expenses. And that horse is probably going to go run.
So I'm going to take this further because I think it's more than just the small and medium-sized people's problem. I think even the high-level breeders need to be making a racehorse first.
Mm-hmm.
You see some of the greatest race mares only get bred to Gun Runner, Into Mischief, Tap It. You know,
think about it. They are these stallions who are throwing top racehorses. So in their minds, they are breeding to produce a racehorse.
But it's not necessarily right for the mare. And you know which mare I'm thinking of.
I know.
You know, and an example other than the one that I haven't said yet, but it was Derby winner.
Winning Colors going to orientate and producing her best foal on the track.
She was bred to some of the best at the time, and then she goes to orientate, and none of the other ones produced a racehorse, but orientate did.
Because here's the thing. If I had that type of money, yeah, I'm sending them to a Gun Runner or a Tap It or a Curlin first because they've earned the right to go to a stallion like that. To me, when it becomes problematic is when that cross repeatedly does not work and you keep going over and over and over. And it's one of those.
So, you talked about this a couple weeks ago, is the Raging Torrent Syndicate a way of balancing this out?
Well, that is the stallion owner trying to make their stallion successful.
True.
Because the nice thing about Puka, she can pretty much be bred to anything and she creates a racehorse. I think, you know, they are purchasing some very expensive horses to be bred to him, but they're expensive because of what they produced.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're in that first year, standing a first year as a stallion, if the syndicate, the owners, whatever, can afford to do what the Raging Torrent Syndicate can do, they are bettering the odds of making him successful.
Mm-hmm.
So
I just think the concept of breeding to rate whether, and I think this is just me being, we post a lot of our stuff online and not everyone's going to agree with what decisions we make, what stallions we send our mares to. So someone who doesn't like us per se could say that we went to Seize the Gray specifically because we're going for that commercial breeding, because more than likely Seize the Gray is going to be pretty decently received when he has his first crop. But then you also have to factor that you don't necessarily know what's going on in someone else's head when they're selecting this mating. So it may look like they're going to tap it or an into for sales, but in their mind, they're breeding the best race mare that they have to the best stallion they can afford.
And I mean, I'll just address it. When with our breed, our mare that we bred to Seize the Gray, we happen to own her dad too.
Mm-hmm.
So we know the bloodlines that her dad matches with really well and is extremely successful with. There aren't a whole lot of stallions out there from that line anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, are we breeding commercially? But yes, we actually are picking what we believe through the generations of her and her sire and what her mother has produced, what sire line she goes with to create a racehorse.
And I guess what I'm saying is I don't see it as much at the top level the stallion farms doing breeding more for a sales product rather than a racehorse. I think it's easy to say because the stallions they choose are flashy, but if you pull back, you don't know the reasoning of why they selected those matings. But I do think you really do see more of the generating a sales product when you get to the mid to lower tier, where you have all these stallions that the farms are trying to just get mares in foal, and then we'll throw them in a sale, and it's kind of more like the throwaway baby. I think that's really where you see the problem comes in.
Well, I mean, there is a drive to put certain numbers of mares underneath your stallion.
You're kind of damned if you do or damned if you don't. Because if you don't,
the general rule is he who breeds the most wins.
And I think that's kind of the basis of the problems that we're starting to see.
But we'll get into some other things to remedy some of that. So I think this is an important trend to look at. And then I've got 3 questions here. Is it good for the industry? Is it good for the breeder? And is it good for the breed? So what I did is I took all of the stallion farms in the state of Kentucky. I evaluated all of their stallions that they stand at their farm, and did it against first year sires and proven sires, and how many mares each one of them bred. So we'll go with the stallions that have at least one crop that is raced, which would mean they had 2-year-olds this year, and then how many mares they bred in 2025, which if they just had 2-year-olds this year, the breeding season would have been over before those 2-year-olds would have even won or ran. But 'tis the law. He's a second-year sire or sophomore. He has 3-year-olds that ran this year.
Yep.
Bred 247 mares.
270.
Or two, yeah. Whoa, flip those numbers. 274 mares. Practical Joke, who is a successful sire, has a $75,000 stud fee. Bred 263. Justify, we all know who he is. $200,000 stud fee. 244. Gunrunner 218. Not this time. 214. Vacoma 211. Buchero $12,500 proven sire that started in Florida.
Indiana bred.
Is a regionally bred horse. He is Bicantheros. He was born in Indiana, and he ran in Indiana as well. And he set the record for number of mares bred for a stallion standing outside of the state of Kentucky at 192 mares.
Wow.
And then last year when he did the 192 mares, that was in the state of New York. He had just moved from Florida to New York. And then Constitution at 188 mares bred.
So before we move on to the zero crops, just want to point out Tis the Law is Tap It Sireline, Practical Joke is Buy Into Mischief, Justify is by Scat Daddy, so he is his own thing. Gunrunner is Candy Ride. Not this time. Giants Causeway, he's his own thing. Vacoma, Gunrunner, or is not Gunrunner. Vacoma is Candy Ride as well. Buchero, Cantheros, Stormcat. And then Constitution's by Tap It. So you've got two Tap It, two Candy Ride.
Actually a son of Constitution.
Yeah. So very interesting to see. We've got some repeating lines in the top 10.
So concerning thing for me also is of our unproven, which means they have zero crops of racing age.
This is where it gets crazy. I'm going to bring up a couple of things at RAC once you get
Arabian Night, 173 mares to him, and this was his first year.
273.
Charge It, 235. This is his first year. Domestic Product, I believe it's his first year, was his first year at 224. National Treasure, it was his first year, 202. Golden Pal was his third year.
Now, Golden Pal was the only horse to ever breed over 300 mares. So that's coming off of that insane stat.
Right. Yalpon, 198 mares. Now, he is one of those that had no crops of racing age. Well, they were of racing age, but they hadn't run yet because his first babies were 2-year-olds this year, but during the breeding season, there were no starts. Mm-hmm. So that was still a risk for everybody to breed 198 mares. King's Barnes, it's his first year at 196. Sees the Gray, first year, 196. Cogburn, first year, 190. Charlatan, it was his second year, I believe.
And then
191. Life is Good. We'll have 2-year-olds next year at 188. And Muth was his first year at 185. So if we were to add all of those up,
it's crazy.
I mean, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 9, 10, 11, 12. 2,400.
And I just want to point out something that's actually insane about this list. Arabian Night, Yalpon, and King's Barnes all have something in common.
Uncle Mo's sons.
Yep. The National Treasure is by Quality Road. Charge It is by Tap It. Domestic Product. Who is he by?
Joke.
Okay. So Into Mischief. Yeah. So same as Life is Good. You know, it's very interesting.
Charlatan is a Spice Town. Cogburn.
Yep. Not this time.
And Muth is Good Magic.
I think so.
Yep.
So Berlin.
You know, and we just went 12 horses deep on this, and they're still breeding 185 mares. So horses that we have no idea that they're going to throw anything. So, do you think it's good for the industry to be doing this?
I think it's nuanced. I don't love breeding to unproven horses, but at the end of the day, that's what the industry kind of rewards. And of course, everyone wants to be part of that first crop that they knew it before they hit. But I think if we're trying to breed sound horses and horses that can run for longer than just 8 starts, I don't think that we should be going to as many first crop unproven stallions, especially when they are lightly raced. If you could not keep them together in a campaign, I don't think they should be breeding 200 something mares their first few books, because we don't know what they're going to throw.
I think you said it. It's what the industry rewards.
Yeah.
I don't think the industry should be rewarding that. I think the industry should be rewarding the horses that throw racehorses.
Well, I think part of it, and this is going meta on it, so bear with me, you may have to cut this out. I think part of it is we're really starting to see, this is kind of like capitalism in the industry, is when the sales market can determine what is awarded and what's not, then you're going to see situations like this that may not be the best for the breed, because it's prioritizing that immediacy of, oh my God, you've got one of the first, you've got something like that. First crop is so important, but that's why you see so many insanely inflated prices.
Right.
It's because everyone always has to be part of that first crop to go big. And I don't think that's good for the breed, because like I said, these are living animals. These are not just products that you can throw away in the trash when you're done with them.
Well, I'm gonna take it a little bit different direction. If I were to predict who will be the freshman stallion winner when Arabian Night, Charge It, Domestic Product, National Treasure, King's Barn, Seize the Gray, Cogborn are all in their freshman crop, Arabian Night is going to be hitting it out for number 1. Charge It's going to be hitting it out for number 2. It's he who breeds the most wins.
The one I think is really interesting to see how he does and how he kind of shapes the standings, just because of the sheer number he has bred, is going to be Golden Pal.
Yeah, but I'm talking the horses I mentioned are all in the
Yeah, I know. They're all, I understand that, but I'm saying to kind of prove that concept, it's going to be really interesting because more than likely you're going to see Golden Pal at the top of the list. But what happens when Golden Pal doesn't throw runners? I mean, he probably will.
What happens when he doesn't breed 200 mares a year?
Well, yeah.
And then that's the thing, what do you judge as
successful? Exactly.
He will no longer be the new shiny thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It just all depends on what you charge as successful. Because, taking it to the racing side, to me, I am more impressed by you running harder and less races and having a better win percentage than running all the races in the world. And you can say, oh, I've won all the races in the world because I've raced so many. Or in this case, I am the top breeder because I've bred that many. I understand that's the way it is. But when I take an outside looking in, is that really successful? Because it's like, yes, if you have, so this will be, if you combine the over 300 years, so 500 Yapons out there, if 20 of them make $1 million, that looks great on paper, but that also means that 440 of them failed or didn't at least live up to that. So, it's one of those where you get yourself in trouble with the volume game, like you're all talking, because everybody's chasing that first crop, and you hear about the first crop numbers when they go for $500,000 or $1 million. But what about the one that went for 40,000?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why when you'll hear me talk to people, and I'll say I don't care who wins the freshman sire.
See, and people are going to think I'm crazy when I say this. The one he bred a lot of mares, but because of his price range, I'm actually not as concerned about it. Charge It.
Yeah.
because the reason why people may hear that and think, oh my, was he 12.5? Is that was his fee?
Yep.
So you would think hearing 12.5, it'd be like, oh, he gets the lower rung mares. No, the reason why I like that is because he's probably going to get the most diverse book compared to everybody else.
So the Stallions that National Treasure was 50 or 70. Life is Good was pushing a
He was
80.
110. He was 110 his first year.
He's literally going to get only the top level mares. Doesn't always work that way.
And I do think it is just, and I didn't agree with the Flightline first year stud fee. Unless you're like a Triple Crown winner or like just something absolutely insane, I don't think you should be entering above $100,000. To me, it does not make sense. Why in the world do you be spending money on a first year sire like that? Because they'd have to sell for exponentially insane after. But that kind of, it's that first year, these stallions are going to come in that super high stud fee. That's the highest, or 90% of those horses, that's the highest they're ever going to be.
So I don't have inside knowledge, but I've run the math. It looks to me that the Stallion farms are trying to recoup the price of the syndication over 3 years before the Stallion ever has runners, based off of a foal crop of about 150 mares covered.
That makes sense.
And when I did that math on the majority of the first year Stallions, it kind of worked.
Because I'm gonna be real, I don't have an issue with first year stallions being 50 and under. I think that's really where they need to be, personally. But it also leads to a larger conversation about what demographics the stallion farms are kind of getting away from now.
Yeah, and we'll deal with that here shortly. I personally don't think it's good for breeders to be pushing. I mean, we know the mid-range and smaller breeders that all they do is breed to first-year sires, trying to catch the lightning in the bottle. They're trying to get the big sales number, make the money while it can, and I think that's a good way for breeders to, one, go bankrupt, and two, diminish the quality of their broodmare stock.
Gotta say, that's a easy way to ruin a mare, because if all things go right, sure, yeah, that mare is gonna have like an insane looking commercial production rate, I guess. But we know horse racing, we know breeding, it never goes correctly. Like, that's just not how it goes. So then you end up, and we have a couple of mares in our program who are kind of like this. They breed to sell, and then all of a sudden they're shocked when it wasn't a good cross for the mare. There was nothing about it that said they needed that, and they deemed the mare a failure because she didn't produce off of a lackadaisical breeding. And that's just not how that works.
I know the mare that you're talking about. If you look at all of the stallions that she bred to, they were all in Kentucky, but they're not there anymore.
Nope.
So is it that she was the problem, or was it the stallions were the problem?
And it can be a healthy mix of both. Sometimes the genetics just don't line up, but
I doubt it.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's good for the breed, because you're throwing that many mares to horses you have no idea whether they're going to pass on the genetics or not.
Right.
So we need to look at this too, because it's kind of between a rock and a hard place if you're going to breed in Lexington, because we got to look at what's the trend. Is the trend proven stallions, or is the trend unproven stallions? So we look at all the stallion farms of, you know, I'm not calling anybody out. This is just pure stats. Lanes Inn has 2 proven stallions, and they have 5 that are 10,000 or less, but they also have 7 unproven stallions.
Mm-hmm.
TaylorMade, 4 proven stallions, 5 unproven stallions. 3 Chimneys, they're more of a boutique breeder. They only have 5 stallions, period. But Windstar has 5 proven stallions, 10 unproven stallions.
And I think they're a tough one because they did just lose a couple of their big horses, and that's
tired them.
Yeah.
Hillendale, 6 proven, 3 unproven, but of their 6 proven, only one of them's under 10,000. Mm-hmm. Ironically, it is a very successful stud that stands for 10,000 or less.
Who is it? Oh.
Ashford, 6 proven, 9 unproven stallions. Darley,
under 10 grand.
Yeah, only 2. Darley has none standing for under 10 grand, but they're really close with 2 that I think are extremely. They're very good sires. They're just not commercial, and that would be Frosted and Midshipman.
And I think Darley falls into a demographic that I think you may be a little shocked that I'm gonna put them in this grouping. But like, to me, Darley, Millridge, Crestwood, they're very much breeders first, and then they'll let the outside public breed to their horses. So they're not going to have the cheap stallion because they don't feel like they have to. And I agree with them. They all have to.
And I had to pick a number, that 10,000 or less. Mm-hmm. But I think some of the smartest breeds for a proven stallion is Midshipman. I think it's 12.5 and Frosted is 15.
Yeah.
Or it's the other way around.
Midshipman is absolutely insane. Like, he is the value horse of Kentucky, in my opinion.
Just like Ashford, I think at 7,500 or 5,000 for Motown, I think that's a steal.
Yeah, I agree on that.
We go down to Airdrie, 6 proven stallions, 5 unproven. Claiborne, 3 proven stallions, which that's Blame, Warfront, Silver State, which he just had 2-year-olds this year.
Yeah.
But I had to throw him in it because all the other stallions they stand are unproven.
They're kind of in the same spot that Windstar's in.
Well, the stallions were getting older, and they've been mentioned, But what you've got to look at is this is a trend. There are way more. Darby Dan, I'd say they're about even, 6 and 5. Crestwood is going through a transformation because some of their unproven stallions or their proven stallions have moved on. I mean, Get Stormy died and that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Spendthrift, 16 proven, 12 unproven. I think what I want to bring up about this is it's not the number of unproven stallions that are standing, because those unproven stallions need to start their career at some point in time. And I do understand there's only so many stallion farms in Kentucky, but we move things so quickly that we don't even know. I mean, if you bred the stallion down there and by about their sophomore year, if they haven't produced multiple graded stakes horses and definitely probably need to have a grade 1 winner, they're not going to stay.
I think go ahead.
Which a lot of this we're going to talk about, later, but I don't blame any of the farms for having a lot of unproven stallions. I do think it has to be balanced, or we have to change perception of where the proven stallions are moving to because of the way things are in Lexington.
To me, it's just having balance, but you also have to keep in mind that stallion farms are cyclical. They go through, they're proven stallions. The most they've got time with them, more than likely, at the most, is like 20 years. So you're going to constantly be in this cycle of having to bring in young horses. I think it's just more keeping it balanced and keeping the prices themselves balanced, because you have to recognize that these proven stallions, if you have opportunities to keep them at under $10,000, you're going to be benefit. And we'll talk about TaylorMade.
Well, we're going to talk about.
We'll talk about TaylorMade, but like I think they've got it right in the sense. Huh?
We're going to be talking about the Stallion Farm specifically here shortly too.
Yeah, I'm saying with TaylorMade specifically, the reason why I'm bringing that up is because when you have multiple opportunities at under $10,000 for these proven stallions, I think it gives smaller breeders or mid-sized breeders a lot more incentive to go with a horse like that, because some of these horses, they're going to be able to sell just fine. And you're going to be able to take them to your regional program, still get your breeders awards on them, depending on the program, and save money. And you have a lot better chance getting a runner out of that situation than you do an unproven stallion.
Right. All right. So, are the Lexington Stallion Farms part of the problem? That's a complicated question. And I think the answer is yes and no. It's a pretty simple question, but it's definitely going to be a complex answer.
Like I talked about.
Are most stallion fees set too high at the beginning of a stallion career, and why?
Yep, I don't think anything should be above $100,000. And as we've talked through already, my sweet spot personally, I don't think they should come in above 50. Now, granted, if they've done an excessive amount on the track, it's a little bit different. But I don't see any reason for anyone coming in any higher than 50.
And see, I said it a little bit earlier that you're looking at. I think the syndicates are trying to recover their entire syndicate cost.
Yeah.
In the first 3 years, and I don't know that for sure, but if I run the numbers for what about a horse is getting syndicated for, if you base it on breeding 150 mares a year,
mm-hmm.
their stud fees are, and to be honest, I can understand from a business perspective why you set the stud fee there to recoup all your money in the first 3 years, because after that third year, whether the stallion can produce winners or not,
mm-hmm.
or big winners. And that's when the fee is either going to stay the same, go up, or go down. And a large percentage of the horses that come in are deemed unsuccessful in Kentucky, so they want to recoup that money.
Yeah.
So I understand the problem, but does that mean to rectify the problem that the syndication prices need to be brought back to reality?
Well, and unfortunately, that's never going to happen. It's capitalism, it's a free market, so they're going to do whatever they can to get the most out of these horses. So,
right, but they're only going to get what people are willing to pay.
Yeah.
And then, are most stallion fees overinflated?
I don't think so. I think, yes, in the first 3 years, but after those first 3 years, I think it comes back to reality.
There might be a case where some here and there are, I mean, obviously, but I think as a generality, once you get out those first three,
Yeah.
I think that seems to be when they find the right number. Is after, which obviously I know you can base it off what happens, but at the same time, it seems like the majority of the time the price makes sense, whatever they adjust it to after those first couple adjustments or first couple of years.
See, I don't necessarily agree.
Okay.
Because I've actually went down the rabbit hole of looking at percentage of winners from starters, percentage of, black type horses from starters versus sales numbers. And I think stallion fees are one based on how successful they are at the sales. But the graded stakes races, which are, the graded stakes winners, which are extremely small number of the total running population, more so dictate the higher stud fee.
I think you gotta remember though that it's completely different, because if you're saying are most stallion fees overinflated, you've got to take into account everyone. It's not just Kentucky. And even if you're looking at Kentucky, you have the absolute. Hang on. Hey,
The question is Lexington Stallion Farms part of the problem?
Nope, you say are most stallion fees inflated. So my thing is, you have to remember the fact that they don't get awards. They don't get stallion awards. The only time that they're going to make money on these horses is for the stud fee. So the stud fee in Kentucky is going to be more expensive, because that's the only time those stallion farms can make money on those horses.
I mean, I see your point, but I think a stallion who has under 40, around 45% winners from starters shouldn't be standing for 90 grand.
So that's one.
That's one that we just talked about. There's another one. There's another one that stands for 125 because of famous races that were won.
Mm-hmm.
But the overall product is not that.
But those are extreme cases at the high level. On the whole, I don't believe the stallion fees are overinflated.
Right. But are you looking at the proven horses only?
No, I'm looking at everybody.
I'll say, because half of the stallions standing there are unproven.
I especially with and I know we're in this conversation, but the reality is you do have to throw a bunch of worth into being overinflated sales, because for those horses, the first 3 years, they don't have horses who are running. So I don't know. I personally don't believe that they're overinflated, because even if the horses that you pulled up, a lot of them are under my $50,000 budget for the first year stallions. I don't see it as overinflated.
I see, obviously looking for who to breed to and this, that, and the other of the first year stallions. I see a significant number of first year stallions that came in well above what they should have.
What is your Is it just your what is that?
Their types of races they won, their pedigree that's backing their stallion making ability, not just, oh, this is a son of somebody, so, and it won this race or that race, and coming in at $30, $35, $40,000. And I'm not going to get into naming specific horses because I understand. Like I said, it's a complex answer. I understand why they do it, but do I think it's the best thing for the industry? Do I think it's helping create the decline in foal crop?
Just on this one, I think we have two different takes.
I think it is contributing to the decline in foal crops.
And I don't disagree with you on that, but I don't know if that automatically means that they're overinflated.
I mean, just remember, overinflated could be 5,000 higher than what it should be.
I understand on this, but I just don't agree with you that most are inflated.
Okay. Are proven stallions, breed to race stallions, moved out of Kentucky too quickly, and why? So I'm gonna start this one off because I see it from both ends, and I'm gonna not only I'm going to defend the stallion farms to a very big extent here. I do believe they're moved too quickly, and I believe they're moved for reasons that are too stringent. But there are only so many stallion farms in Kentucky. Mm-hmm. There are only so many stalls at those farms to stand horses. And by keeping a non-outstanding racing stallion or non-commercial stallion, that eliminates room for deserving first-year stallions to come start their stallion career. So it's a rock and a hard place kind of situation. If they keep useful stallions at a reasonable price, then there's no room for the retiring stallions that are retiring every year that may be the next big thing. So yes, they are moving too quickly, but I don't know that there's an option to not move them on from Kentucky because the number of stallion farms have shrunk from what it even was when we got in the business.
See, I think where the complexity comes in is when they're exported quickly. I personally would love to see most stallions get a regional shot first before being exported. But then at the same time, you also have to rely on regional breeders having the money to be able to buy these stallions for the insane prices that these stallion farms do sell these horses for. And most of the time, regional breeders aren't going to be able to offer you more money than someone from another country.
Right. And the big thing is there are times, and I know of specific stallions, that the syndicate and stallion farm were really not interested in moving that particular stallion on, but the money offered to them was so crazy stupid money that they had to take it. Mm-hmm. Because that horse could go out in the field, colic, break its leg, whatever. And there is the offer that couldn't be refused. So there is a high demand in foreign countries for U.S. stallions.
Yep.
Do I like it? No. Do I understand it? Absolutely. I've turned it down.
Yeah.
So, like I said, do I fault them? No. do I understand from a breeder's perspective that these horses are being moved too quickly? Yes. I think there are things that can be done to still not grade these horses a failure, because there are limited farms, limited stalls in Kentucky to be able to house all of these stallions. And I think perception of stallions that move from Kentucky needs to change. And I don't fault the Lexington stallion farms for that.
Yeah.
Because, you know, if you keep all these stallions, what are you going to do when sovereignty retires?
Yeah.
Tell them we don't have any room. You know, they're putting the rock in a hard place. They have to choose. But, and we'll talk to it with solutions later on, I think there are some solutions to how to make it okay that these useful stallions are no longer in Lexington.
Yeah.
This one's going to be the controversial one. Are limits on the number of mares bred by a stallion needed, and why? I know it was put in place to put a limit on them, and then it was taken away. But I 100% believe that there needs to be a reasonable limit put on mares bred in North America per stallion.
I think it's 185 mares. That's like my comfort.
Yeah, I was in the 150 ballpark. And here are my reasons why. One, breed diversity. Two, wear and tear on the stallion himself. We are not an AI breed. It's live cover. So that is definitely wear and tear on the stallion to be covering that many mares every year. By putting those numbers, I mean, you look at the numbers we had of number of mares covered in, you know, earlier, you know, those horses that bred 100 or 264 mares, there's 90 mares that are going somewhere else.
Yeah.
And I do believe it would be better for the breed to have that limitation.
Mm-hmm.
Justin?
So I have a two-part question. If we do put this into place, because I am interested based on what you said earlier. So one part of the question is, does that then, in theory, limit the foal count even more? Because if people only want to get to these big name stallions and they can't be one of the 150, do they then not breed to anything?
No, they end up going to breed to someone else.
And I guess from that, do you think it goes? So then, do you? I guess in those cases, you see all the proven go down, and people would probably transition to unproven horses. Then
no, because shockingly, I don't think that most of the proven horses have books that big.
Right.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I think
people are really trying to capitalize that first 2-3 years.
And see, I think some of the horses that are proven but not necessarily fashionable, if they weren't robbed of, you know, breeding 120 mares, you know, through their first 3 years or 4 years, and then they settle out around 40 or 50, if we weren't breeding 250 mares to these other stallions, they would still be getting larger books. The more mares you breed, the more chances you have of producing the big horse. So I think it's actually good for all of the stallions, because it's not that people aren't going to breed.
The only other thing I guess I would worry, and just to get, I want to hear both your perspective. Wouldn't that, in theory, then make stud fees go even more up because they know they can only breed 150 to this thing? So does it solve one problem but create another? Because if I have justified 200,000 and I've used to be able to breed them 300 times if I want, and now there's 150, do I not, in theory, go then say, well, my stud fee is now 400 grand?
Yeah.
But that's going to be only the very upper echelon horses.
So it will take like the top shelf to another level and then kind of balance out everything else.
And it really may not.
Right.
I mean, we would have to see, but that's on a very upper echelon that the majority of breeders aren't even looking at.
Right. True. That's a whole different class anyway. So for the normal any of us listening or talking on this, is probably not going to be one that we're going to go. It's interesting because then I wonder, what does stud fees look like then? Because do they say, well, we've got to recoup the money, so let's raise it, or do they take the approach that you said, say, well, we'll get more mares to a degree spread out through our farm? I don't know.
I do think there's an increase. I think that just makes sense, a natural increase because of scarcity. I don't think it's dramatic, but I could see another $5,000.
Well, and I also think it would make a farm have to deepen their roster because you can't just rely on one horse runs your whole entire farm necessarily if you do get to a point where they're limited on how many.
But when you're talking 150 mares or higher, the realm of breeding these almost 300 mares a year is a newfound.
Gotcha. Okay. Let's see. That's what's different for me because I'm only familiar with these super high numbers. I mean, I know obviously we looked earlier, but like I'm used to seeing like when I saw 190 on there, I'm like, oh, only 190. I know that sounds crazy, but it's just like when you see all the other numbers. So with you all having the past knowledge of that, it being nowhere near that, at least for a long time, it's just interesting to see the shift.
Yeah, I don't see. I mean, granted, yes, some of these upper tier horses are going to lose a significant amount of breeds, but vast majority of the market, just in Lexington itself, you're going to see the numbers of other horses go up.
Yeah.
So let's say your $10,000 stallion is out there breeding 60 mares.
Mm-hmm.
He's still, or let's change that. Let's say a $15,000 stallion is out there breeding 60 mares.
Right.
Well, with the limits, maybe he's breeding 125 at 15,000.
The unfortunate thing, though, is the stallion farms who are against the stallion book caps already identified what they perceive to be a constitutional flaw with that concept. So until we can get stallion farms to not prioritize profit over breed bottlenecking, I don't think that we're ever going to be able to put a limit on number of mares, because it's the major players of the game who are on that lawsuit.
Right, but here would be my point. Jockey Club has nothing to do with the Constitution.
No, but the Jockey Club herself can get sued. So
I know I know, but at what point do we make the hard decisions that is best for the breed instead of best for the few?
Yeah, it's just one of those that, since they've already identified an issue that can get them sued, I mean, it's kind of a dangerous game you're playing, though. I mean, they've kind of got, sorry to be crass by this, they've got the Jockey Club by the balls. They can't do anything without risking them being sued, and that actually negatively impacts the breed because that directly comes from grants, from funding, all these funds that can go to actually bettering tracks and, you know, providing scholarships for people and things like that. That's what's going to get directly targeted when these stallion farms go to sue the Jockey Club, because they already tried it before.
Well, like I said, when is it time for people to do the right thing versus, hey, we're making a bunch of money? We'd still be making money. We'd still be breeding the same amount of mares. But I think it has gotten out of hand.
Yeah.
I mean, number of mares bred to a single stallion has went up since they tried putting limits. So there's no self-governance. And there was a farm.
They don't care.
There was a farm, and I'm not mentioning it, who self-governed themselves and put their own limits on their how many mares their stallion can be bred.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to be a thing. I mean, I think it's going to be something that, if we're ever going to see it, it's going to be a regulated thing, because it relies, and this is a little deep, but it relies on the good in people to do something like that. And when you incorporate greed into anything, oftentimes the good nature of people doesn't necessarily beat out the greed. And that's kind of what we're seeing here.
So this is where I say, yeah, the stallion farms are part of the problem.
Yeah.
I mean, just to be blunt, if the stallion farms want to breed 300 mares a year to studs, that's a problem.
Yeah.
And, this is a recent problem. This is not something that this has been the thoroughbred industry all along. No. Back in the day when we were breeding the same amount of mares in the 70s that we are breeding today, there weren't any stallions getting 200 mares.
But it also wasn't really... The racing world has really been turned in my opinion.
Prestige. It was for prestige and not for cash.
Capitalism. You get capitalism involved in anything, this is what happens.
I have to say I disagree with that, because there was an interview with the Japanese.
Mm-hmm.
Racing is for prestige, and talk about capitalism. Japan is just as big a capitalistic country as any.
But Japan is still exclusionary in terms of who they have actually involved in their racing world. It's not really opened up to, I mean, you get some businessmen and things like that, but it's institutional families over there. And I think what we're having here is we're getting a lot of businessmen and a lot of people who do come from making inanimate products into this industry. They can throw all this money around, and then they get promised by these stallion farms that their stallions are going to breed X amount of money or X amount of mares, so they can get all this money. I mean, I think it really is, when you get this, I know you disagree with me, I think really introducing capitalism over prestige into the industry is why we're getting what we are. And that's why the commercial market is being run by a market and not necessarily by performance on track. To me, I think that's the clearest example that capitalism is running the industry right now, is the fact that so much emphasis is put on the commercial market.
But I don't agree that capitalism is saying breed 300 mares to studs. I don't. I think that is
capitalism is, I can, so why not? If I can make money on it, why not?
There is a side of capitalism that, hey, I can make and sell them to regular people and make a bunch of money. But do I because it's wrong? No.
That's not necessarily capitalism. That's called morals and ethics. And I think that's where having a fundamental, this is where capitalism without morals and ethics can run rampant when you have greed. And I think that's kind of what we're both saying, the same thing, is we can't rely on the good nature of people to make situations or make calls like limiting a stud book, because I know of one farm that does it, but I only know of one farm that does it here, you know?
Right. But what this question is, are the Lexington farms part of the problem or not? This is one I think they are part of the problem. I don't think they should have to be regulated to put these limits on. It should be common sense. Huh?
I think that because the moment you start assuming things are common sense, it's not common. I think they should be regulated, honestly.
What I'm saying is, to be part of the problem or not part of the problem, common sense should regulate this.
And what I'm saying is common sense is, like, I agree with you.
Right, but I'm answering the question of whether they are the problem or not.
I understand you're answering the question, and I'm agreeing with you on answering said question. But I'm saying the reality of that is, if we rely on common sense is not common sense. And we're seeing the farms have already tried to sue the jockey club for trying to put in regulation like this. I do think it's going to have to be something that is regulated, because we've seen that if you just rely on the good nature of the farms, there's nothing's changing. In fact, they're going to sue you when you try and do something that could benefit the breed, could be better for the horses, but it infringes on their profits.
Right. But where I can see it is, I think I think this is a contributing factor to number of mares bred a year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really, so if it increases the number of mares bred, doing the right thing can actually be a benefit.
Yeah.
So, and I do agree. What I'm saying is, you shouldn't have to regulate it. And there is a governing body who I don't want to see getting into the breeding part of this industry. But if they were, it would probably be the end of that governing body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think it's one thing for the racetracks and that group to fight some of the problems.
Yeah.
A governing body, but the breeding side will not. It would be the downfall of that governing body if they were the ones that tried to step in and say
that. Yeah.
So this is also a money versus, it floats on money, but is the number of mares bred to a stallion, expected number of mares bred to a stallion, to stay at a Lexington too high? Once again, this is a yes or yes, but yet no, because it's a matter of real estate.
Yeah.
There are stallions coming in every year. There's only so much room for them. But I think there's other ways of accomplishing the same goal when if a stallion is moved, they're a failure. No matter how good they were, if they're moved, they're a failure because they couldn't stay in Kentucky. That mindset needs to stop.
Yeah.
Because horses move because new horses come in, and there is not enough space for everybody to be in Kentucky.
Yeah.
There's not enough farms anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, back in the day, I can think of, was it Stonewall was one that we went to back in the day that no longer exists. Vinery, Richland Hills. And there are several other stallion farms that they just don't exist today.
Yeah.
Or they don't do stallions anymore. So I would like to see that, 40 to 50 mares a year was a reasonable number for a stallion to be able to stay. But when it comes right down to it, I understand the Stallion Farms issue of where do we put them.